Anybody fortunate enough to go to Munich this past Sunday for the matchup between the Seattle Seahawks and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers not only was able to witness the NFL coming to Germany for the first time ever, but also two very interesting teams at completely different stages of their life cycles. Having followed both teams pretty closely, as the seasons have gone quite differently than expected coming into 2022, I thought this was a great time to talk about them in terms of this game in particular and the grand scheme of things. When I put out these videos in the middle of the week usually, the next slate is already upon us, so getting to dive into these two teams who are now entering the bye week was pretty cool because we get a little room to breathe and don't have any new information coming our way as quickly. For this exercise, I decided to first talk about how both teams made it to this point, look at the tape from Sunday, and talk about how it fits into the rest of their seasons in terms of reoccurring themes or new issues / areas to get excited about. Finally, I want to conclude my thoughts on either side going forward, lessons that might have been learned, and how they might fit into the NFC playoff picture. Let's dive in, starting with the de facto visitors in the Seahawks. It was a very interesting offseason for Seattle, as they decided to trade the 10-year franchise quarterback Russell Wilson for a massive package from Denver to restock on draft capital, along with flat out releasing a counterpiece to Russ on defense in middle linebacker Bobby Wagner, adding the retirement of running back Chris Carson, and shedding a lot of the replacement level pieces from this roster. It really opened up space in the salary cap and created opportunities for this young core that was about to come in to quickly make a name for themselves. However, not many people expected them to make any noise this season. Then he had a phenomenal draft class, which I really liked back then already, but now I can say that this could end up being a franchise-altering list of names that they brought in. They drafted the bookend tackles of the next several years, it appears, with Charles Cross and Abraham Lucas, potentially their two long-term starting corners in Kobe Bryant, and an absolute steal in Tariq Woolen from the 5th round, who's a top 2 candidate for Defensive Rookie of the Year right now. They have a couple of very promising edge rushers in Bowie Mafe and Tyreek Smith, plus of course the awesome favorite for Offensive Rookie of the Year in running back Kenneth Walker III, who has been absolutely phenomenal ever since working through the hernia surgery and taking over for the injured Rashad Penny. They added some under-the-radar free agents like Uchenna Nwosu from the Chargers, who is now the top pass rusher, but the uncertainty about the quarterback position was looming over the squad, and now it feels almost ridiculous to think back about how Drew Lock was supposed to compete with Geno Smith for that spot. But this battle dragged itself into preseason. By any conceivable metric, Geno has been a top 10 quarterback in the NFL this season, and you'll see some of this big time throws here shortly. As far as this past Sunday goes, they came into the matchup with a 6-3 record, 2 games ahead of the 49ers, and 3 games each on the Rams and Cardinals, which the latter they already swept this season, after ruining Russ's return to Seattle on a last-second missed field goal, with the Broncos head coach Nathaniel Hackett's bizarre decision to not put the ball in the hands of his $250 million quarterback. The Hawks suffered by far the worst loss of the season, the following week losing to the 49ers by 20. Over the ensuing 7 games, they averaged 31 points per game offensively and went 5-2 over that stretch. That included close wins, and those were 2 touchdowns over playoff teams in the Chargers and Giants. So they were well on their way to playoff berth, in a division with them as the only group above 500, and a losing team in the 7th seed right now. On the other side, we have Tampa Bay. Their 2021-22 season ended in the divisional round against the Rams, when they had put together a crazy comeback, but ultimately allowed that deep ball to Cooper Kupp, which set up a game-winning field goal. However, after Tom Brady's short-lived retirement, they brought back most of that squad, along with some veterans looking to get their ring, which put them back atop the AFC along with the eventual Super Bowl champs in the Rams as far as preseason odds were concerned. So it only felt right that they invigorated their season and team as a whole the week prior in a comeback win over those very Rams, as Brady led them down the field for a decisive touchdown with 44 seconds and no time was left. Prior to that, a 2-0 start with wins over the Cowboys and Saints was followed by just winning one of the next 6 contests, with a 21-3 loss to the rebuilding Panthers as they lowered over that stretch. They have been dealing with recurring issues in the receiving corps and on the offensive line each, along with what looked like a dominant defense early on, falling off in a major way, with one of the stars in Devin White being publicly called out by franchise legend and Warren Sapp. Similar to the Seahawks in a surprisingly underwhelming NFC West, being in a Southern Conference that by default had them atop the rankings with just a 4-5 record, thanks to beating up on each other and the rest of the league doing so in out-of-division games on them. Still, the reason the Bucs came into this matchup with more belief in themselves was the way that they were able to rally from behind against LA the week prior, and that self-confidence was on display early on as they controlled this game for the most part for about 3 quarters. As much as we make about Brady and all those receivers around him, the identity of this Bucs team since he got there was how dominant they were in the trenches on both sides of the ball. That included a physical downhill rushing attack on their end and a defensive line that could reset the line of scrimmage, combined with the elite speed on the second level defensively. However, coming into Sunday, they were dead last in the entire league with just 61 yards on the ground on average and a minuscule 3 yards per carry, whilst not having gone over 75 in any game since the season opener versus Dallas. We saw little to no vertical movements and combo blocks, as one of those teams that runs as much do as any group in the league, but they also didn't balance it out with any schematical versatility, and then they were putting the ball in Leonard Fournette's hands continuously, who would tiptoe in the backfield and not be able to build up any momentum. That's along with a few toss plays, where he simply doesn't bring the burst to really threaten the edges of the defense. So what we saw against the Seahawks must have been encouraging, as they actually started rookie Rachaad White for the first time this season, in part as a disciplinary measure due to Lenny reportedly nearly missing the flight to Germany due to not having an up-to-date passport. But the Rook gave them some juice that we haven't seen from them this season, and while Fournette had a couple of solid runs eventually, and did score a touchdown at the goal line, he got banged up, and we saw the transition to White accelerated here. My big issue with White coming out of college was the fact that he had a tendency of dancing in the backfield and trying to win with his athleticism, rather than maximizing lanes that are there for him as a physical runner. And after running into the backs of his linemen earlier this season, I thought he found a good combination of leading second level defenders to the wrong spots before accelerating through lanes and into would-be tacklers. In the week 9 matchup with the Rams, we saw the rookie show some signs of growth here. Here the Bucs sent 13 or 22 personnel, depending on how you want to label Keeft, since he's been playing a lot of fullback for them. He's at the Y spot here, with 2 more tight ends at his hip, and they just run duo, getting those combo blocks on the front side 1 and 4 eye techniques. White does a great job of pressing that front side crease here, forcing the will linebacker to leverage himself that way, and then he cuts behind his center, sticks his foot in the ground, lowers his pads through awaiting defenders for extra yardage. And then of course his burst through the hole is just different, as he showcases on this lead draw from I formation. I'm just going to show you here from the All-22 angle so you can see it better. As he takes this handoff, he's going to attack that crease and just slightly hesitate behind it, so his 2 defensive linemen stay shaded to the outside before he darts through that hole and rips off 8 or 9 yards. But it was really on display against Seattle. Tampa has a tight bunch with 2 tight ends and Chris Godwin to the right here. The Seahawks overload that side, but the Bucs are still able to create a lane for White here. As the Bucs run a crack toss to that side, if the back is just able to open it up a little bit for himself, White threatens the edge hard before sliding underneath the key block by the right tackle here, bursts through the hole and lowers his shoulder onto the safety for 9 yards. Later on, the rookie displays good patience without pitter-patting in the backfield. I'd call this GF counter, as we have the backside guard kicking out the edge defender Bruce Irvin, and the fullback lead up the C-gap. However, as we watch this thing unfold, Irvin decides to wrong shoulder the pull of Shaq Mason here, who as we can see turns him inside. White sees it and beautifully transitions from this little side shuffle into a jump cut and it explodes through the hole before throwing safety Quandre Diggs into a different dimension with this nasty straight arm. This is the final drive of the day, as Tampa Bay just tries to run out the clock. Here's another duo run, now from 11 personnel, with Godwin as the hip slot to the left, and you can really see the rookie manipulate this playside linebacker into getting himself blocked by the left tackle, with a little nod to the outside, before bursting through the hole and ripping off a big gain. And here's the last play of the game. The Bucs bring Godwin across the formation at the snap, and I'd probably label this as a lead zone with a split element by the fullback. And it's kind of interesting how White attacks this, because as you can see, he gets his shoulders and feet parallel here to not allow the backside linebacker to track him, then points the toe to the outside, kind of hops with his little grace here, and if not for the maturity to run out the clock here, he's probably gone for a touchdown. Now, those are a lot of positives for the Bucs' re-emergence of the run game, but how are we feeling about the Seahawks run defense right now? Not counting Brady's numbers, the backs of Tampa combined for 164 yards on 30 carries. In a vacuum, you can live with those good 4 yards per carry, but this was Seattle's 8th of 10 games allowing over 100 yards on the ground, which puts them at number 4 in total yards allowed. We see them run a lot of penny fronts with 5 defenders on the line and just one linebacker behind it, who has to be very disciplined with tracking the ball carrier. We see teams motion tight ends in line and them not matching that with bringing an extra defender into the box, which puts them in a number deficit towards the offense, and usually some big runs where backs don't even get touched for a good 20 yards if they can just set up the linemen climbing to the second level. The Seahawks are pretty undersized on the edges, with a lot of speed rush types, which is interesting that they brought back Bruce Irvin, who was one of the first guys that I can remember in this mold being drafted in the first round, and they've brought in a bunch of similar guys like that, which allows offenses to press the front side and make the guys behind it have to overflow, opening up cutback lanes in the zone run game, and going behind blockers leading up into the hole on wraparounds and stuff like that. Despite having some big bodies on the inside, that's how we've seen teams have success against them on the ground. Getting back to the Bucs, marrying that ground game with play action shots has been the most effective way for them to create junk plays over the last couple of seasons. Brady was 7th in the NFL in EP per play on play action drops coming into this game, but because they didn't run the ball effectively, they also didn't access that part of the playbook as regularly. I refuse to just give into the analytics community that says you don't have to run the ball at all in order to be effective on play action, but this may have been more on the coaching staff not being willing to use it, as Brady was 37 for 39 eligible quarterbacks, running play action on just 15% of dropbacks. That percentage doubled on Sunday, as Brady went 8 of 9 for 110 yards. And we've seen some signs lately, like these 2 plays against the Ravens from Thursday Night Football in Week 8. On this first one, the Bucs are in 11 or 20 personnel, yet again depending on what you label Keith as. They fake this dual run, leading to a 7-man pass pro for this sort of levels concept, with a big post from Julio and an over by Chris Godwin, while Mike Evans on the backside occupies the underneath coverage on this hitch or quick in route. Brady turns his back, and as he comes back to it, he whistles this ball right by the linebacker before the safety can get down there. Godwin pulls out at the tackle and rips off 43 yards. And this one isn't even off play action, but it shows the way Tampa can create space and how Brady can still lay the ball into those windows for his receivers. I really like what he can do out of this set, where they have the tight end by himself in his 3x1 set from 11 personnel, as he motions a bunch on the other side. It's basically the same placement to Mike Evans in the steep over, crossing the face of the safety, dropping down, and having a ton of space behind that second level, with Brady putting it slightly behind him. However, as we saw later in this game, those plays went off the board, as Brady didn't trust his protection or receivers to quite do what he expected them to. No idea why Brady doesn't hit this short in-route by Scotty Miller, with all this space underneath. But more noteworthy, he doesn't trust the interior protection here to just step up that way, but rather curls up like a ball and takes the sack by Justin Houston. That makes it 3rd and 14 now, and once again, there's no reason for Brady to not let this ball fly for Mike Evans here on this out and up, with the Ravens rotating away from him into cover 3 here. You see him get outside the pocket slightly here, but for some reason pull this ball down and just take the sack by Houston. All of that looked very different on Sunday, when Brady was pressured on just 5 of 29 dropbacks, and they were able to attack vertically off play action. Early on they are in 20 or pony personnel, with 2 true tailbacks on the field. This isn't even very convincing on a run fake here, but it's enough to get Mike Evans behind the safety, acting as the robber, while the Bucs have a comeback by Chris Godwin from a reduced split to the backside, and then work Evans and Julio across the field deep, who will both actually break open here. Brady floats this gorgeous bucket throw to Mike Evans for about 40 yards. Later on in the first half, Tampa has this tight bunch to the left and go with another pretty soft run fake on this dive, with a backside fade alert by Evans and expanding those 3 receivers to the left against yet another single high safety look. Brady lets this ball go to Godwin on a deep crosser just as that back foot hits, and right into this window between the hook droppers for yet another chunk. The very next snap, they give that same look just flipped with the tight bunch to the right now, only this time they run a scissors concept off play action, with the tight end releasing towards the flats after chipping the end man, and a backside single receiver running a deep out. The Seahawks rotate the weak side safety down late yet again, so now it's really all about what Ram Neal does here, trying to stay over the top of these 2 vertical routes. He ends up flipping with Chris Godwin on the steep corner route, which leaves Scotty Miller wide open on the post. And if he could just freaking stop jumping when the ball is in the air and he doesn't have to, That's a walk-in touchdown rather than a bad-looking double catch. Leonard Fournette would punch it in a couple of plays later. However, this might be the most encouraging play of the day for Tampa Bay. They're in second and goal with twins to the side, 2 wide receivers to the left, and 2 tight ends stacked on the right side respectively. Brady motions Rashad White across, and he should probably just flip it out there to him on his flat screen. However, when he doesn't and decides to pull this ball down, he doesn't panic, trusts the protection, which does a great job of picking up this 5-man pressure. Brady comes all the way back to the other side and flips it to Godwin on his delayed out route, as what I guess is just a backside alert, and he cash in for the touchdown. I could show several other plays here where trust is the key word, with receivers being at the right spots and the offensive line giving Brady a clean platform to release from, which I want to credit Nick Leverett, who was recently inserted at left guard and has done an excellent job of mirroring interior rushes. Flipping things over to the Seahawks offense, they've been well inside the top 10 in DVOA pretty much ever since week 3 I believe, thanks to big plays for the air, but also looking at the way their rookie running back Kenneth Walker III has been gashing defenses on the ground. This isn't based on actual weight, but Seattle runs the heaviest offense in the league in terms of personnel usage, putting multiple tight ends on the field and more than 55% of snaps, and running as much 13 personnel as about any other team probably as well. They really threaten the edges of the defense with outside zone and different toss variations, oftentimes using one of those tight ends on lead blocks as they bring him across the formation, with a little shout out to my guy Colby Parkinson, destroying some of those guys to widen those lanes for Kenneth Walker. The rookie averaged 22 carries for 106 yards for his first 4 starts. That in theory wasn't a great matchup for the Bucs at all, who had shown real cracks in the armor recently against the run, which they had been dominant against in recent years. Outside zone in particular was deadly against them, where their linebackers would overrun plays, and Devin White in particular had been taken for a ride by linemen on several occasions. The Panthers ran all over them in a pretty dominant 21-3 upset win, where we also saw the defense cheat to some degree. The Ravens took a little bit to figure out how to attack that unit exactly, but also found good success once they got those linemen up to the second level, with rookie center Tyler Linderbaum bullying White on a couple of occasions. They tied out that front and hit some big chunks late that night. It was their 4th in 5 games, surrendering more than 150 yards on the ground. Yet on Sunday, that Tampa defense held a phenomenal rookie running back on the other side to just 17 yards and 10 carries, as Seattle got into negative game script, and the Bucs shut down all that stuff to the edges. The total is only slightly propped up to 39 yards, thanks to a couple of Geno Smith scrambles. First drive of the day, and you really see that speed by Devin White to flat out run down Kenneth Walker here on this toss play, in a favorable look for the offense, having a 4-1-4 towards the play side, with White head up on the center. And if he doesn't get there, that might be a touchdown against a team that doesn't have a flying missile at that spot. Almost the same thing later here when Seattle gets the ball back. They're in one of those 3 tight end sets with all of them onto the defensive left side, which they run another toss towards. The entire defense does a great job of stringing this out, and once again White's speed can really shine here to run this down for no gain. And shortly before halftime now, after Geno just delivered a big throw to make this 3rd and short, the Hawks stay in 11 personnel with the tight end to the left and run inside zone to the weak side. But as you see in a second here, the Bucs dominate the point of attack, and Antoine Winfield does a great job of filling the B gap here. The backside edge really squeezes this down and gives it no space for the running back to operate. Walker stops his feet and is taken down for a tackle for loss. In concert with that, the Seahawks must have gotten more catches and yardage off slide routes on bootlegs than any other team in the league. They go to the well over and over again on first downs, consistently picking up yardage on those, or those weak set flood concepts with drags and deep overs in order to create those vertical stretches. I could probably put together an entire hour of these examples where they bring the tight end across or peel him off against the flow of the defense, and those guys picking up easy yardage over and over again. However, those were not available to them this past Sunday at Allianz Arena, where you could tell that the Bucs had a clear plan for it. Here's a teaching tape rep for the defense from the 3rd quarter. The Seahawks had 13 personnel, so meaning 3 tight ends, and have everybody in the box, with wide receiver Marquise Goodwin and Kenny Walker in the split backfield. This is a different way of how they can get to one of the play action staples on the backside flood, as they make this look like split zone before the running backs slip into the flats, along with a deep corner route on that side, and then Noah Fant working across the field on a stick, while the 3rd tight end over here in Colby Parkinson peels off late as well. So what they want to do is really condense the formation originally to then be able to expand and have more space to work with from this probably unscouted look. Just check out how perfectly the Bucs picked this up, as Devin White's speed can once again shine to shuffle with the run for a split second before getting to the back in the flats, the bracket the corner route, and the cornerback on the single side trails Fant across the field, where the other corner becomes the hang defender and is just waiting for him to come over that way. Geno has to scramble for a couple of yards and is lucky that the refs throw a very questionable flag here on the back end of this. Let's talk about some of the issues that the Tampa Bay defense had previously. I really think that they were too complex at times from the second month of the season on. And I'll show you a couple of plays from the Chiefs game back in week 4. They run this half inward Tampa 2, meaning the safety and corner at the top of the screen basically switch responsibilities, with the latter being responsible now for the deep half, despite being already out at the numbers, while bringing the strong side nickel off the edge and playing it more typical cover 2 on the other side. Meanwhile, Kansas City is in a 2x2 set with 2 tight ends to the right who run what I would refer to as bench, meaning a short out and a corner out to stretch that flat defender, along with a dagger variation to the wide receiver side, where now you have Lavonte David being forced to run with Marquez Valdes-Scantling, who's allowed to run straight down the hash. And as you can see, he actually does a great job here, and if that ball isn't as well placed, he might actually break it up. But that's just a very tough ask from any linebacker, no matter how good he may be in coverage. In the second half of that game, the Chiefs had a 3x1 set with the tight end as the single at the top of the screen here in a reduced split, while motioning Juju into split backfield look here before orbiting back around and ultimately having him run a slow swing route. The Bucs don't react to any of that, however, and while it did put a lot of pressure on one of the linebackers just earlier, Patrick Mahomes does not expect actual man coverage here, with the way the defense isn't reacting at all. In fact, they rotate into this cover 2 or 2 match of a free safety set, where the backside safety bails out, and a deep middleman has to cap over the top of this free wide receiver action. Casey runs this sort of pick play with MBS, getting a free release on the wheel route into what ends up being a massive window as the safety has to get all the way out there from his original single high alignment. Perfect throw and an easy pickup. When the Bucs started playing more static coverages, in particular cover 3, they've looked a lot better, and we saw it against the Rams. This is a great snap for them running 3 deep, with the Rams trying to take a shot off play action, as the 2 outside corners found those 2 skinny post routes towards the deep middle safety, where there's no spot to fit the ball into, while in front of that you have those 2 linebackers passing off this crossing route very well too. And it ends up in a big overthrow. The only time recently, in this game specifically, where I felt like playing a basic coverage really hurt them was on this 69-yard touchdown by Cooper Kupp. They're once again playing cover 3, but Ellie does a tremendous job here of spacing and splitting that single high safety with those 2 seam routes, along with Stafford doing a great job of affecting a guy with his shoulders before letting it fly for Kupp here, which really in the coverage is almost indefensible, and he's off to the races for that long TD. Plus, when they do go to true man coverage on third downs, they were really good at minimizing that space to the receivers without allowing natural rubs to happen, along with using those guys at the line to muddy up those windows over the middle, like here, where there's very little space for those receivers to work with, and they have Joe Tryon-Shoyinka and Lavonte David bailing out of this pressure look. Well, they ultimately just bring in 3 and have 8 guys in coverage, everybody locked up, and just no place to fit the ball into. Meanwhile, the Hawks have been one of the most explosive passing attacks in the league this season, and we had seen several big throws from Geno Smith. His ability to diagnose pre-snap looks and then confirm the picture post-snap has been tremendous. You see several snaps throughout this tape where he's working full field reads, understands when to get to the backside, and his ball placement has been stupendous at times, sort of breaking the structure of defenses and throwing his guys open, even when they've been tightly covered. You see him protect his receivers against ancillary zone defenders, putting the ball into spots where only they can make a play on them, and delivering those shots down the field at times after having to slide inside the pocket and not having a clean platform to release the ball from. And don't get me wrong, Geno was still able to rip those timing-based routes outside the numbers to DK and Lockett, but it was tough sledding, having to read our concepts, and finding holes inside the Bucs coverage because of the way that they were able to play with the eyes on the quarterback in zone, while still giving the quarterback some new information post-snap to process. This is the first drive of the day for the Hawks. It's 3rd and 10. They have a wide bunch here to the right in a 3-by-1 set with the tight ends in a reduced split as the single receiver. Those 3 wide receivers run cross-release verts basically, while Fant on the backside has a steep swirl route, I would call it. The Bucs dropped on Antoine Winfield for another simple cover 3, but they do a great job here of staying at the landmarks and spacing this out whilst playing with appropriate leverage. And as we watch this unfold, really the only way that Geno could go here is wait for Fant to ultimately convert this back to the inside or check it down to his back, who Levante David has eyes on. And as we can see here from the end zone shot, the Bucs are able to make him run into the sack with simulated pressure, would end up just bringing 4 but push the quarterback back with this TT twist on the inside, which gives Tryon Trinka off that left edge an easy angle to run Geno down and get this big sack to start the day. This is from the second quarter. Seattle's in twins here with 2 wide receivers to either side. They have an alert, I'm guessing, with rookie wide receiver Derek Young here as the slot to the left, while the wide out that way clears out space for him. And they get Lockett and Disley from the other side working across behind that. Tampa brings down one of their safeties yet again in Mike Edwards late in this weak side rotation, who looks like he's shot out of a cannon here, getting to that slot receiver, which spooks Geno a bit, not trying to throw a pick 6 here. And he tries to come back over the middle, which those windows have closed here momentarily. And even though Tyler Lockett would break open eventually here, working towards the left sideline, Geno feels like he has to move around a bit here and ultimately checks it down to his back, who would be taken down immediately anyway with Tryon Trinka bailing out that way. And for good measure, he has a great man coverage snap in cover 1 in the low red zone, where everybody does a great job of playing to their leverage and understanding that they have help on the inside with Tryon Trinka and Devin White, who a couple of seconds in here are allowed to hunt and ultimately track down Geno as he starts moving around, which results in a huge fumble on his part. To be honest, the Bucs give the Seahawks some life in the second half with the Wildcat catastrophe as Brady was uncovered on the first one of those snaps, but then Leonard Fournette decided to throw the ball across the field, where now Tariq Woolen was capped over the top for what has to be the biggest athletic mismatch in NFL history, as the rookie corner came down with a high-point interception. That's along with Brady very uncommonly just completely missing a hook dropper for an easy interception as they're trying to close out the game. Geno and the Hawks tried to rally late with a couple of huge throws, once on 4th and long whilst having to fade away from Devin White, bearing down on him in a blitz, and twice into the end zone, where once Lockett did a tremendous job of nodding outside on this forward concept to turn his man and the safety to that side in order to break back to the post, before Marquise Goodwin made a leaping grab on a perfectly placed corner route where Geno took a lick as he released the ball. What ultimately didn't allow Seattle to finish this comeback was what we already identified as a defense that has been very vulnerable against the run, but also very much receiving running backs because of how much cover 4 they run and how that gets the weak side linebackers matched up with those guys, which happened on a huge 3rd and long late, where Jordan Brooks fell down, and let's hope he's okay, but Keyshawn Vaughn easily picked up the yardage. Tackling has been certainly an issue for this group, as they've missed the 7th most tackles in the league with 52 of those. Now, where does all of this leave us with these two teams going forward? I really feel like the Bucs are starting to find their identity and confidence again. This somewhat reminds me of Brady's first year in Tampa Bay, and reinforcements seem to be on their way, as Pro Bowlers Ryan Jensen at center and safety Logan Ryan are both eligible to return from injury reserve following the bye week. Considering there's very little to challenge them in the South, and some questions about the second-tier teams in the NFC in general, they all of a sudden are right back in the thick of things, I believe, which I would have certainly not said a couple of weeks ago. The Seahawks, on the other hand, come with some more concerns, I believe, out of this game, because while there are plenty of redeeming qualities with this group, there are also legit areas of concern. We saw that if opposing defenses can slow down the Oregon rushing attack and are ready for all those boots off that, along with having a beat in the quick game, Seattle doesn't nearly work as smoothly in pure dropback settings, as good as Geno has been. And then defensively, while I think the Bucs found some answers on their end, this was still the worst rushing offense in the league coming into Sunday. The Hawks rely on a lot of fairly unproven pass rushers who won't be as fresh when they get to those critical downs. At 6-4, they do still control their own destiny, and would be my favourites to get into the playoffs as a 7th seed, but I think the 49ers will overtake the division lead in the rematch. The one thing I'm sure about, if these two square off against each other again in the playoffs, that would be really fun. Thank you so much for watching. This took a lot of work to put together, so hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, leaving a like, commenting your thoughts, sharing it with a friend or two would all be greatly appreciated. With Thanksgiving coming up next week, I'll take a little break from recording full videos or written pieces, but I'll probably put something out there, along with certainly throwing out my betting picks and general thoughts on the games and just stuff happening around football. If you want to see or hear more from me and just want to stay up to date with everything I post, feel free to follow me on social media. The links are down below in the video description, along with the link to my page helloswithfootballtalk.com, where you can find all my content in one place. Hope to have you all back very soon. So until then, see you later. Peace!